The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Clara Bennett stepped onto the wooden sidewalk of Abilene, Kansas, clutching a wailing infant to her chest, knowing that if she failed this child, she would have failed the only person who ever truly loved her. It was July of 1875, and the heat pressed down on the bustling cattle town like a heavy hand. Clara shifted the baby, her sister's daughter, against her shoulder and tried to soothe the crying with gentle, bouncing motions. 6 weeks had passed since she received the telegram that changed everything. Her sister Margaret had died bringing this precious life into the world, and her brother-in-law had perished 3 months before that in a mining accident outside Denver. At 23 years old, Clara found herself the sole guardian of 2-month-old Rose, and she had traveled halfway across the country to start over where no one knew their story. The town sprawled before her with its saloons, general stores, and cattle pens filled with longhorns. Cowboys shouted and laughed, their spurs jingling as they walked. The smell of livestock mixed with the scent of sage and dry earth. Clara had responded to an advertisement for a seamstress position at a dress shop owned by a widow named Mrs. Henley. The job came with a small room above the store, just enough space for Clara and the baby to make a life. She made her way down the main street, her worn traveling dress clinging to her back with sweat, the baby still fussing in her arms. Rose had been colicky for the past week, crying through most nights, and Clara felt exhausted down to her bones. But she kept walking, her carpet bag heavy in her free hand, searching for the dress shop that would be her salvation. "Ma'am, you look like you could use some help." The voice came from behind her, deep and warm like honey. Clara turned to find a tall cowboy standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He had sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes were the color of creek water in summer, a clear blue-green that seemed to see right through her exhaustion. "I am managing, thank you," Clara said, though Rose chose that moment to let out an ear-piercing shriek that made several passers-by turn and stare. The cowboy stepped closer, his expression concerned rather than irritated. "I have got 5 younger siblings back home in Texas, raised most of them myself after Ma died. That little one sounds hungry or maybe needs changing. The dress shop you are heading to, I would wager, is 3 buildings down on the left. Mrs. Henley is a good woman. She will help you get settled." Clara felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. "How did you know I was going to the dress shop?" "Heard in town that Mrs. Henley hired a seamstress from back east. You have got that look about you, educated and refined, even travel-worn as you are. Plus, you are carrying a carpet bag and a baby and looking at every storefront like you are searching for something." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face from handsome to something that made Clara's heart skip unexpectedly. "Name is Jackson Cole. Most folks call me Jack." "Clara Bennett." She adjusted Rose again, and the baby finally quieted to soft whimpers. "This is Rose. She is my niece, but I'm raising her now. Her parents both passed." Something shifted in Jack's expression, a softening that reached his eyes. "Then that makes you her mother as far as I'm concerned. Love makes a parent, not just blood." The words hit Clara square in the chest. For weeks, she had worried that she was not enough, that she could never replace Margaret, that she was playing at being a mother without any right to the title. But this stranger, this cowboy, spoke with such conviction that for the first time, Clara felt like maybe she could do this. "That is very kind of you to say," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "It is just the truth." Jack gestured down the street. "May I carry your bag? I am heading that direction anyway, and you have got your hands full." Clara hesitated only a moment before nodding. Jack took her carpet bag, which seemed to weigh nothing in his strong hands, and walked beside her at an easy pace. He did not pepper her with questions or make her feel scrutinized. Instead, he pointed out useful places as they walked: the best general store for fair prices, the doctor's office, the church where a kind preacher held services on Sundays. "You work with cattle?" Clara asked, noticing the lasso tied to his belt and the worn leather chaps he wore. I do. I am a trail boss for the Rocking M Ranch just outside town. We drive cattle up from Texas to the railhead here in Abilene. It is hard work, but honest. I have been saving my wages, hoping to buy my own piece of land someday, run my own operation. He spoke with quiet pride, and Clara found herself watching the way his hands moved as he talked, expressive and capable. They reached the dress shop, a tidy building with lace curtains in the windows and a painted sign that read Henley's Fine Dresses and Alterations. Jack set down her bag and tipped his head respectfully. I wish you and little Rose all the best, Miss Bennett. Abilene can be rough, but there are good people here too. If you ever need anything, I bunk at the ranch, but I come into town most Saturdays. You can leave word at the general store and it will find me. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Your kindness today means more than you know. He put his hat back on and that smile appeared again. Just Jack, please. And it was my pleasure, ma'am. Clara watched him walk away, his long stride confident and easy, before she turned and entered the shop. A bell chimed overhead, and a plump woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from behind the counter. Her face broke into a warm smile. You must be Clara. Welcome, dear. I am Ida Henley. Oh, and who is this little angel? Ms. Henley proved to be everything Jack had promised and more. She cooed over Rose, showed Clara to the tidy room upstairs with its own wash basin and a window overlooking the back garden, and insisted they have tea and biscuits before discussing work details. The room was small but clean, with a bed, a dresser, a rocking chair, and a wooden crate that would serve as Rose's cradle. You will start tomorrow, Mrs. Henley said firmly when Clara tried to protest that she could begin working immediately. Today you rest and settle in. That baby needs you strong, not collapsing from exhaustion. That night, Clara fed Rose with the bottle she had prepared, using the milk Mrs. Henley had kindly provided from her own icebox. She changed the baby's diaper and dressed her in a clean gown, then held her in the rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth as Rose finally fell into a peaceful sleep. In the quiet darkness, Clara let herself cry. She cried for Margaret, who would never hold her daughter again. She cried for the life she had left behind in Philadelphia, where she had been preparing to marry a banker's son before everything fell apart. She cried from exhaustion and fear and the overwhelming weight of responsibility. But she also cried with relief because she was here, they were safe, and for the first time since receiving that terrible telegram, she felt the smallest flicker of hope. The next morning, Clara woke to Rose's hungry cries just as dawn light filtered through the window. She prepared a bottle, fed, and changed the baby, then dressed herself in her best day dress and pinned up her auburn hair. Mrs. Henley showed her the workroom behind the shop, full of fabric bolts and sewing notions with a Singer sewing machine that made Clara gasp with delight. You know how to use one? Mrs. Henley asked. Oh, yes. I trained at a dressmaker's shop in Philadelphia for 3 years. I can handle any kind of needlework. Then we will get along just fine. The work was exactly what Clara needed. Her hands knew what to do, and the familiar rhythm of stitching calmed her mind. Mrs. Henley set up a padded basket near Clara's work table where Rose could sleep, and the baby seemed content in the quiet shop, surrounded by the soft sounds of scissors and thread. Days turned into weeks. Clara fell into a routine of early mornings with Rose, long hours of sewing, and evenings spent caring for the baby and doing washing. The work was hard, but it was honest and satisfying. She made dresses for ranchers' wives, altered trousers for cowboys, and embroidered linens for the hotel. Her reputation for fine work spread quickly. Every Saturday, Jack Cole appeared at the dress shop. The first time he brought a rattle he had carved from wood himself, smoothed to silky perfection so Rose would not get splinters. The second time, he brought fresh milk from the ranch. The third time, he simply asked if Clara would like to take a walk with him after the shop closed. She said yes. They walked along the edge of town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jack carried Rose, who seemed fascinated by his face, reaching up to grab at his nose and chin. He laughed and made silly faces that had the baby cooing with delight. "You are good with her," Clara said, watching them together. "I told you, I helped raise my brothers and sisters. The youngest was just a baby when Ma passed. I was 16, and my father worked the ranch dawn to dusk. It fell to me to do the feeding and changing and walking the floor at night." He spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "It taught me that taking care of someone is not a burden. It is a privilege." "I worry I am not doing enough," Clara admitted. "Sometimes she cries, and I cannot figure out what she needs. Sometimes I'm so tired I can barely think. And I wonder what Margaret would have done differently. Better?" Jack stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Clara, that baby is fed and clean and loved. She is thriving. I can see it every time I visit. You are doing more than enough. You are doing everything. But I am not her real mother." "Yes, you are." His voice was firm. "You got up and crossed the country for her. You work your fingers to the bone to provide for her. You walk the floor with her at night when she cries. You love her like she is your own blood. That makes you a mother in my eyes, in anyone's eyes who matters." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. Jack shifted Rose to one arm and used his free hand to gently wipe Clara's tears away with his thumb. The gesture was so tender that Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away since she learned of Margaret's death. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I do not mean to fall apart." "You are not falling apart. You are just being honest. That takes courage." He smiled softly. "Come on, let me walk you back. This little one is getting sleepy." As summer faded into autumn, Jack's Saturday visits became the highlight of Clara's week. He would arrive at the shop just as it closed, and they would walk together sometimes around town, sometimes out to the prairie where they could see for miles. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the satisfaction of working with cattle and horses. She told him about Philadelphia, about her education at a girls' academy, about Margaret, and the close bond they had shared despite being 5 years apart in age. "She was brave," Clara said one evening, as they sat on a blanket watching Rose play with grass stems. "When she married Thomas and moved west, everyone said she was foolish. But she said she wanted adventure, wanted to build something new. She wrote me letters full of such joy. And then Thomas died in that mine collapse, and she was alone and pregnant, and I should have gone to her sooner." "You cannot think like that," Jack said gently. "You did not know. None of us can see the future." "I just wish she could have met Rose, held her, known her. It seems impossibly cruel that she died bringing her into the world." Jack reached over and took Clara's hand. It was the first time he had done so, and the warmth of his palm against hers sent a current of feeling through her entire body. "Rose will know her mother through you. You will tell her stories, show her Margaret's letters. Love passes on, Clara. It does not die just because someone does." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw everything she had been trying not to acknowledge. She saw his kindness and his strength, his easy way with Rose, his patient understanding of Clara's grief and fear. She saw the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare, and she realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with this cowboy who had carried her bag that first day and told her she was a mother. The realization terrified her. She had been engaged before back in Philadelphia. Richard Thornton had been handsome and wealthy, the perfect match according to her parents. But when Margaret died and Clara inherited Rose, Richard had made his position clear. He would marry Clara, but the baby would have to be sent to an orphanage. No negotiation, no discussion. Clara had broken the engagement without a second thought, but the betrayal had stung. How could someone who claimed to love her ask her to abandon her own niece? "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, studying her face. "The past," Clara admitted. "I was engaged once before I came here." He did not want Rose. said a baby would complicate our life together. Jack's jaw tightened. Then he was a fool who did not deserve you. Maybe, but it makes me wary. I come with responsibilities now. Rose has to come first, always. As she should. Jack squeezed her hand. Clara, I'm not asking you for anything. I just enjoy your company and Rose's, but I want you to know that I see you as a package deal, and that is more than fine with me. That is what I want, if we are ever to be more than friends. Her heart hammered in her chest. Are you saying you want to court me? I am saying I have wanted to court you since the day I met you on that dusty street, looking fierce and exhausted and beautiful. But I know you have been through a lot, and I do not want to rush you. I am a patient man. Clara looked down at Rose, who was gumming a grass stem with intense concentration. She thought about the life she had imagined with Richard, full of society parties and empty conversations. Then she thought about the life she could have with Jack, full of honest work and real connection and love that was not conditional. I would like that, she said softly. I would like to be courted by you. Jack's face broke into a grin so wide it made her laugh. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Then I am the luckiest man in Kansas. The courtship was sweet and slow and utterly proper. Jack came to the shop every Saturday, and they would spend the evening together, sometimes with Mrs. Henley chaperoning, sometimes walking through town where everyone could see them. He brought gifts for Rose, a soft blanket his sister had knitted, a teething ring carved from bone, a stuffed horse made of calico fabric. He brought gifts for Clara, too. Wildflowers from the prairie, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, a beautiful shawl in deep blue that matched her eyes. They talked about everything. Jack told her about his dreams of owning his own ranch, of breeding quality horses and running cattle. Clara told him about her love of reading and sewing, about her hope that Rose would grow up strong and educated. They discovered they both loved thunderstorms and hated pickled beets. They debated whether Texas or Kansas had better sunsets. They laughed until their sides ached at silly things, and they comforted each other through hard moments. Winter came, and with it the bitter cold that swept down from the north. Clara worried constantly about keeping Rose warm enough in their small room. Jack appeared one Saturday with an iron stove, which he installed himself, refusing any payment. I cannot let my girls freeze, he said simply, and Clara's heart swelled at the possessive "my." By the time spring arrived and Rose celebrated her first birthday with a small cake Mrs. Henley made, Clara knew beyond any doubt that she loved Jack Cole. She loved the way he was gentle with Rose but firm when needed. She loved how he listened when Clara talked, really listened, asking questions and remembering details. She loved his integrity, the way he worked hard and treated everyone with respect. She loved his hands, calloused from ropes and leather but so careful when they touched her face or held Rose. On a warm May evening, Jack took Clara and Rose out to the prairie for a picnic. He spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree, and they ate bread and cheese and apples while Rose toddled around, chasing butterflies with shrieks of delight. She was walking now, tottering on unsteady legs, and every milestone filled Clara with fierce pride and piercing sadness that Margaret was not there to see it. After they ate, Jack played with Rose, letting her climb all over him like he was a piece of furniture, her delighted giggles floating across the prairie. Clara watched them together, and her chest felt so full it might burst. This was family. This was love. This was everything she had not known she wanted until it appeared in the form of a cowboy with kind eyes and a generous heart. Finally, Rose wore herself out and fell asleep on the blanket. Jack sat down next to Clara, close enough that their shoulders touched. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the air smelled like grass and earth and possibility. Clara, Jack said, his voice slightly unsteady, I need to talk to you about something. Her stomach flipped. All right. I have been saving for years now, working as many drives as I could, putting away every spare dollar. And last week I closed on a piece of land about 5 miles south of here. 200 acres with a stream running through it, good grass, and a small house that needs work but has good bones. He turned to face her fully, taking both of her hands in his. I am building something, Clara. Building a future. And I want you and Rose to be part of that future, if you will have me. Clara's breath caught. Jack, are you... I am asking you to marry me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. It was my mother's ring. It is not fancy, but it is real, and it is full of love. Because my parents had the kind of marriage I want to have with you. A partnership built on respect and affection and working together towards something bigger than ourselves. His eyes searched hers. I love you, Clara. I love how strong you are and how tender. I love watching you with Rose, seeing how much you have grown into being her mother. I love talking with you and laughing with you and just being near you. And I love Rose too, like she is already my own daughter. I know I'm just a cowboy without much to offer except hard work and a good heart. But if you will have me, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Tears streamed down Clara's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks ached. You are not just anything, Jack Cole. You are everything. You are the best man I have ever known, and I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but then Clara sighed and leaned into him, and the kiss deepened. It tasted like promises and hope and coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I will be good to you, he whispered. Both of you. I swear it. I know, Clara whispered back. I trust you. They married 3 weeks later in the little church in town. With Mrs. Henley and several ranch hands as witnesses, Clara wore a dress she had made herself from cream-colored silk, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Rose wore a matching dress and toddled down the aisle ahead of Clara, throwing flower petals with enthusiastic inaccuracy that made everyone laugh. Jack stood at the altar in his best suit, his face full of such love and joy that Clara felt like her heart might actually burst. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Jack kissed her sweetly, then scooped up Rose and kissed her forehead too. Hello, daughter, he said softly, and Rose patted his cheeks with her chubby hands, babbling happily. Clara saw several women in the congregation wipe away tears, and she had to blink hard to keep from sobbing herself. Mrs. Henley hosted a small reception at her house with cake and lemonade and toasts to the happy couple. As the afternoon wore on, Clara felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A year ago, she had stepped off that stagecoach terrified and alone, convinced she was not enough to be what Rose needed. Now she stood in a room full of friends, married to a man who loved her unconditionally, starting a new chapter that seemed too good to be true. Jack had spent the past weeks working on the house, getting it ready for his new family. When he carried Clara over the threshold that evening with Rose balanced on his other arm, Clara gasped. The house was small but sturdy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a loft. Jack had built a rocking chair for the corner where Clara could sew and rock Rose. He had hung curtains in the windows and put wildflowers in a jar on the table. Everything was clean and ready and welcoming. It is not much yet, Jack said, sounding nervous, but we will build it up together. I am thinking we could add on another room or two as we need them. It is perfect, Clara said, meaning it. It is home. That night, after they put Rose to bed in the small cradle Jack had built, Clara and Jack consummated their marriage. He was gentle and patient, clearly experienced, but not in a way that made Clara feel compared to anyone else. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, murmuring how beautiful she was, how lucky he was. When they finally joined together, Clara felt a completeness she had never experienced. Like pieces of herself she did not know were missing had suddenly clicked into place. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Clara's head on Jack's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Are you happy?" Jack asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," Clara said honestly. "Are you?" "Happier than I have words for." He kissed the top of her head. "I meant what I said, Clara. I am going to spend every day making sure you and Rose know how loved you are." "I already know," she whispered, "but I will never get tired of hearing it." The first year of marriage was full of hard work and profound joy. Jack ran cattle and broke horses, building his herd slowly and carefully. Clara continued doing seamstress work from home, setting up a workroom in the loft where she could sew while keeping an eye on Rose. The income helped as they established the ranch, buying more livestock and supplies. Rose thrived in the country air. She grew from a toddler into a little girl with auburn curls like Clara's and an adventurous spirit all her own. She followed Jack everywhere when he was home, wanting to help with every task. He was endlessly patient, letting her help feed the chickens or brush the horses, teaching her to be gentle with animals and respectful of the land. Clara watched them together constantly, her heart full to bursting. Jack never once treated Rose as anything less than his daughter. He called her his little sage hen, his prairie flower. When Rose scraped her knee, she ran to Jack. When she was scared of thunder, Jack let her crawl into bed between him and Clara. When she asked questions about everything under the sun, Jack answered seriously, never dismissing her curiosity. "You are wonderful with her," Clara said one evening as they sat on the porch watching Rose play with a litter of barn kittens. "She makes it easy," Jack said. "She is a special little girl, smart and kind and brave, just like her mother." "Mothers," Clara corrected softly. "Margaret gave her life, and I am trying to honor that by raising Rose to be everything Margaret would have wanted." Jack pulled Clara close, kissing her temple. "You are doing more than that. You are giving her a good life full of love. That is the greatest gift any parent can give." When Rose was 3 years old, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with excitement and terror in equal measure. She was thrilled at the thought of giving Jack a child of his own blood, but she worried about having enough love for 2 children, about Rose feeling displaced. Jack laughed when she voiced these concerns. "Clara, love is not a finite resource, it multiplies. You will love this baby completely, and it will not take anything away from what you feel for Rose. And Rose will be a wonderful big sister." He was right, of course. When Clara told Rose she was going to have a baby brother or sister, Rose's eyes went wide with wonder. "A baby? Like the baby dolly you made me?" "Yes, but a real baby who will cry and eat and eventually play with you." Rose put her small hand on Clara's still flat stomach. "I will protect the baby," she said seriously. "I am big now." Clara's heart melted. She pulled Rose into her lap and held her tight, breathing in the little girl's smell of sunshine and grass. "You are the best big sister any baby could ask for." The pregnancy was easier than Clara expected, though the Kansas heat that summer felt particularly oppressive. Jack hovered constantly, insisting she rest more and not lift anything heavy. He took over more of the household chores, cooking dinner and doing laundry without complaint. Rose helped too, patting Clara's hand and bringing her water without being asked. In November of 1878, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy in their bedroom, attended by the doctor from town and Mrs. Henley. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara thought of Margaret, understanding for the first time how truly brave her sister had been. But finally the baby arrived with a lusty cry, and the doctor placed him in Clara's arms. Jack came in moments later, having been banished to the barn during the birth. His eyes were red-rimmed with worry, but when he saw Clara holding their son, his face transformed. He knelt beside the bed, looking at the tiny person they had created with awe. "He is perfect," Jack whispered. "You are amazing. You are so strong." "We have a son," Clara said, her voice full of wonder. "A son, Jack." Rose climbed up on the bed, careful not to jostle Clara, and peered at her new brother. "He is very small," she observed, "and red." Jack laughed, ruffling her hair. "You were small and red once too, Sage Hen. He will grow." They named him Thomas, after Rose's father, with Jack's name as his middle name. Thomas Cole grew quickly, a robust baby with his father's eyes and a surprisingly loud voice. Rose was as good as her word, helping with the baby constantly, singing to him when he cried and bringing Clara diapers without being asked. Clara fell in love with her son completely, but Jack was right, it did not diminish what she felt for Rose. If anything, becoming a mother through birth made her more certain that motherhood was about choice and commitment, not biology. She had chosen Rose that day she got off the stagecoach, and she chose her every day after. That made their bond no less real than what she felt for Thomas. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Jack's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled cattleman spread, and they were able to buy more land, expand their herd, and make improvements to the house. They added 2 more bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a big front porch where they sat in the evenings watching the sunset. Rose started school in town when she was 6, riding in with Jack when he went to conduct business and staying with Mrs. Henley during the day. She excelled at reading and arithmetic, and her teacher said she had a gift for storytelling. Clara made sure Rose knew about Margaret, showing her the few photographs she had and reading her the letters Margaret had written. Rose listened solemnly, asking questions about the mother she never knew. "Do you think she would like me?" Rose asked one night as Clara tucked her into bed. "She would love you," Clara said firmly. "You have her curiosity and her bravery, and she would be so grateful that you are happy and loved and safe." "I am glad you are my mama," Rose said, throwing her arms around Clara's neck. "And I am glad Papa Jack is my papa. I know he is not my first papa, but he is the one I remember, and he is the best papa in the world." Clara had to leave the room quickly before Rose saw her cry. She found Jack in their bedroom, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing is wrong," Clara managed. "Everything is so right, it overwhelms me sometimes. She called you the best papa in the world." Jack held her close, and she felt his chest shake with his own emotion. "That little girl is one of the greatest blessings of my life," he said roughly. "Right up there with you and Thomas. I could not love her more if I had fathered her myself." When Thomas was 3 and Rose was 7, Clara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder, and the doctor warned her to take it easy. Jack hired a girl from town to help with housework and cooking, and he cut back on his own work to be home more. Rose, mature beyond her 7 years, stepped up to help with Thomas, keeping him entertained and out of trouble. Clara gave birth in the spring of 1882 to another daughter. The baby girl had dark hair like Jack and cried with impressive volume. They named her Margaret, called Maggie for short, after Clara's sister. It felt right to have Margaret's name live on, to have Rose's birth mother remembered and honored. Rose was enchanted with her baby sister. She helped change diapers and sang lullabies and insisted on holding Maggie every chance she got. "She looks like me," Rose said proudly. "We could be real sisters." "You are real sisters," Jack said firmly. "Blood does not make family, love does. You 3 are siblings in every way that counts." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to grow, and Jack hired a few hands to help with the work. Clara's seamstress business flourished, with women coming from surrounding counties for her dresses. Rose grew into a thoughtful, creative child who loved books and horses in equal measure. Thomas was all boy, constantly covered in dirt and bursting with energy. Maggie proved to be the social butterfly of the family, charming everyone she met with her dimpled smile. On Rose's 10th birthday, Clara gave her a special gift, Margaret's journal from her time in Colorado. Rose opened it with reverent hands, running her fingers over her birth mother's handwriting. "This is the best present ever," Rose whispered. "Thank you, Mama." That evening, Rose came to Clara and Jack as they sat on the porch watching Thomas and Maggie play in the yard. She held the journal close to her chest. "I read some of it," Rose said. Margaret wrote about being pregnant with me, about how excited she was. She said she hoped I would grow up strong and kind and loved. She paused, her eyes bright with tears. I think I did grow up that way because of you. Both of you gave me that. Clara pulled Rose into her lap, even though she was getting too big for it, and Jack wrapped his arms around both of them. Your birth mother loved you before she ever met you, Clara said softly, and she would be so proud of the person you are becoming. I hope you know that I love you just as much. You made me a mother, Rose. You taught me what it means to put someone else first, to love without conditions. You are my daughter in every way that matters. I know, Rose said, wiping her eyes. I have always known. And Papa Jack, you are my real father, the only one I need or want. Jack's voice was thick when he spoke. That means more to me than you can possibly understand, Sage Hen. Being your father is one of my life's greatest honors. They sat together as the sun set over the prairie, a family bound not by blood alone, but by choice and commitment and the kind of love that weathers any storm. Thomas and Maggie ran up eventually, demanding attention, and the moment broke into happy chaos. But Clara held on to the feeling, the bone-deep certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who wanted to be a teacher, studying hard and helping at the schoolhouse when she could. Thomas became Jack's shadow, learning everything about ranching and showing a natural talent for working with horses. Maggie proved to be the creative one, filling notebooks with stories and drawings. When Rose was 18, she applied to a teaching college in Kansas City. Clara felt torn between pride and sorrow at the thought of her leaving, but Jack was steady as always. We raised her to have wings, he reminded Clara. Now we have to let her use them. Rose came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about her classes and new experiences. She never forgot her roots, though, and she always made time to ride out to Margaret's grave at the town cemetery, bringing flowers and sitting for a while in quiet reflection. On one such visit, Clara went with her. They stood together looking at the simple headstone that read, Margaret Ann Bennett, beloved sister, loving mother, 1850 to 1875. Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if she had lived? Rose asked. Sometimes, Clara admitted, but I cannot regret what happened because it brought you into my life. I would not trade being your mother for anything in the world. Rose leaned her head on Clara's shoulder. I am glad I got you. Both of my mothers loved me, and that makes me the luckiest person alive. The ranch prospered beyond Jack's wildest dreams. He eventually owned over 1,000 acres and ran several hundred head of cattle, but he never forgot where he came from, and he was known throughout the county as a fair employer and generous neighbor. He and Clara became pillars of the community, hosting church socials and helping families in need. Thomas married a rancher's daughter when he was 22, and they built a house on the far edge of Jack and Clara's land. Maggie went to art school in Chicago, her talent recognized and nurtured, and Rose became a beloved teacher in Abilene, known for her patience and creativity. She eventually married a kind doctor and gave birth to a daughter she named Clara Margaret, honoring both her mothers. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jack took Clara back to the cottonwood tree where he had proposed. It was May again, and the prairie was green and lush. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky. Do you remember that first day? Jack asked. When you stepped off that stagecoach looking like you were ready to fight the whole world? Clara laughed. I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing. And then you appeared and carried my bag and told me I was a mother. You were. You are. The best mother I have ever known. Jack took her hand, his thumb tracing over her wedding ring. You know what I love most about our life together? We built something real, something that will outlast us. Rose will teach children for years to come. Thomas is raising the next generation to work this land. Maggie is making the world more beautiful with her art. And all of it started because you were brave enough to get on that stagecoach and choose love over fear. I had help, Clara said, squeezing his hand. I could not have done any of it without you. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You loved Rose before you even knew her, just because she was mine. That changed everything. Jack pulled her close and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of 20 years of love. When they broke apart, Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. I love you, she whispered. More today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. And I love you, Jack replied. My wife, my partner, my best friend. Thank you for saying yes to that cowboy with a worn-out hat and big dreams. Thank you for seeing that a woman with a baby was not a burden, but a gift. They stayed there until the sun began to set, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and their plans for the future. They talked about Margaret and how her sacrifice had given them Rose, how tragedy had somehow transformed into blessing. They talked about everything and nothing, the way couples do who have spent decades learning each other's hearts. As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, Jack helped Clara to her feet. They folded the blanket together, moving in the synchronized way of people who have worked side by side for 20 years. Hand in hand, they walked back to the house that had become home, the house full of memories and love. Inside, they found Thomas and his wife had stopped by with their 2 young sons. The boys were running around the kitchen while Maggie, home for a visit, was attempting to paint their portraits. Rose and her husband arrived moments later, little Clara Margaret toddling in on unsteady legs, the house filled with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family. Clara stood in the doorway of the kitchen watching her people and felt Jack's arms come around her from behind. He rested his chin on top of her head, and together they observed the life they had built. This is everything, Clara said softly, everything I never knew I wanted until I had it. We are not done yet, Jack murmured in her ear. We have got decades left to love these people, to watch our grandchildren grow, to keep building this legacy. Clara turned in his arms and looked up at him. His face was weathered from years in the sun, lines crinkled around his eyes from smiling, silver threading through his dark hair. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Then let's not waste a single moment, she said. They rejoined the family, Jack scooping up one of his grandsons while Clara took little Clara Margaret. Rose caught her eye across the room and smiled, a smile full of love and gratitude and understanding. In that moment, Clara thought of Margaret again, hoping somehow her sister knew what had become of her daughter, hoping Margaret could see that Rose had been loved and cherished, that she had grown up surrounded by family and opportunity and joy. The evening stretched on, full of good food and storytelling and the kind of deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Clara and Jack prepared for bed. They moved through the familiar routine of married life, comfortable in the intimate knowledge of each other. As they lay together in the darkness, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From that terrified young woman on a stagecoach to this confident matriarch surrounded by love. From feeling inadequate as a mother to knowing, bone deep, that she had done right by Rose and all her children. From believing she would never find true love to lying in the arms of a man who had proven his devotion every single day for 20 years. Jack, she whispered, Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I told you I was raising Rose? I said that makes you a mother in my eyes. His arms tightened around her, and I meant it then, and I mean it now. You are the definition of what a mother should be, Clara, not because you gave birth, though you did that too, but because you chose love. Every single day, you choose love. That is your gift. Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks onto the pillow. Happy tears, grateful tears. I chose love, she agreed, and love chose me back. It chose me in the form of a cowboy who carried my bag and saw my worth when I could not see it myself. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars, wild and beautiful and full of promise. Inside, the house held the echoes of laughter and the warmth of family, a testament to what could be built when fear gave way to faith, when circumstances transformed into opportunity, when love was allowed to flourish in all its forms. Rose grew old in that house eventually, visiting often with her own children and grandchildren. She would sit on the porch with Clara and Jack, watching the younger generations play, and talk about how grateful she was for the life they had given her. She kept Margaret's journal her whole life, reading it to her own children so they would know their grandmother's story. Thomas took over the ranch when Jack's joints grew too stiff for the hard work, running it with the same integrity and care his father had shown. He passed those values on to his own sons, who would pass them on in turn, creating a legacy that stretched far beyond cattle and land. Maggie's art was displayed in galleries across the country, but her favorite pieces were always the ones of her family. She painted the ranch house a dozen times, capturing it in every season, trying to immortalize the feeling of home she carried in her heart. And Clara and Jack grew old together on that prairie, watching their family tree branch out in directions they never could have imagined. They saw grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying pieces of them forward into the future. They sat on their porch every evening they could, holding hands and watching the sunset, grateful for every moment they had been given. When Jack died at the age of 78, having lived a full and rich life, Clara held his hand and whispered her love into his ear until his last breath. She grieved deeply, as anyone would who had lost their other half, but she did not regret a single moment. They had built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were both gone. Clara lived another 5 years, surrounded always by family, never alone. On her last day, Rose sat beside her bed, holding her hand just as Clara had held hers so many times over the years. "Thank you," Rose said through tears. "Thank you for getting on that stagecoach. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for showing me what love looks like." Clara smiled, her eyes drifting to the window where she could see the prairie stretching away toward the horizon. "It was my privilege," she said softly. "Being your mother was the greatest honor of my life." She died peacefully that evening, and they buried her next to Jack under the cottonwood tree where he had proposed so many years before. The whole county came to pay respects to the woman who had touched so many lives with her kindness and strength. Rose stood at the graveside with her siblings, surrounded by the family that Clara and Jack had created, and she knew without question that both her mothers would be proud of the life she had lived and the love she carried forward. The ranch continued for generations, passed down from Thomas to his children and grandchildren. The house was maintained and cherished, added onto as needed, but always keeping the heart of it intact. And on summer evenings, you could still find people sitting on that porch watching the sunset and telling stories about Clara and Jack, about Rose and her siblings, about the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. It was a legacy built on a simple truth that a cowboy had spoken on a dusty street in Abilene all those years ago. Love makes a parent, not just blood. Love makes a family. Love makes a life worth living. And Clara Bennett Cole had lived a life full of love in every possible form, leaving behind ripples that would spread outward for generations to come, touching lives she would never meet, but who would carry pieces of her story in their hearts forever.